This morning it's my pleasure to introduce Parker Harrison, who is our guest musician, though he really doesn't feel like a guest because he's been attending our services for some time now and is a familiar face. Parker has been playing the piano, keyboard, and guitar since he was a child and has been performing for audiences solo and in bands for several years. He's currently studying music and music production at the University of North Florida. He said he is so delighted to be playing for our service this morning, but I'm even more delighted to welcome him to the chancel. He'll be playing his own composition, Beowulf's Barrow. Thank you so much, Parker. That was beautiful. Our opening words this morning are actually from a poem by Unitarian Universalist Reverend Gretchen Haley. The poem is entitled Awaken to This Gift. Open the door of your hesitant heart. Let the light shine on all of the sleeping shadows. Awaken to this day that offers itself to you and to all with a great extravagance. Awaken to this gift, this beauty, this chance, that we might still begin again and anew, that we might be changed by the in and the out of breath, that we might still burst forth like the crocuses, that we might still surprise this earth with a new song sung together, calling us all in and then sending us back out, and know it all as a blessing. Come, let us worship together. And now I'd like for you to find your lovely gray hymnals, Singing in the Living Tradition, and open it to number 38, Morning Has Broken. I'll invite you to rise in body or spirit and join me for all three verses. Thank you. That was beautiful. It's so nice to hear voices. I'd like to invite Valerie Buffard to come forward this morning to light our chalice as I share with you the words of UU Minister Reverend Suzelle Lynch. The fire of love burning deep in every human heart calls us to awaken. Awaken to the work of justice. Awaken to the work of compassion. Awaken to the work of community. For in this time of human suffering and exaltation, we are called beyond awakening into action. May the chalice flame we now light guide our hearts in service to a greater good that holds all living things in its holy embrace. And I will invite you again to rise in body or spirit and join me for the call to worship. The words can be found in your order of service. Good morning. My name is Linda Mowers, your worship leader, and I welcome you to this morning, this day, and this opportunity to be together in community, which is a time of joy, comfort, and sometimes challenges. This Unitarian Universalist congregation is a place where we come to learn more about being human. We're not here because we figured out life's questions or because we think we've got it right. We come here to learn more about being in relationship together, how to listen, how to forgive, how to be vulnerable, and how to create trust and compassion in one another. Our beliefs are diverse and inclusive. We have no shared creed, but we unite in our values as we covenant to affirm and promote our shared principles. Our living tradition calls us to draw from diverse sources. These principles and sources were created and articulated through a democratic process as our Association of Congregations evolved. They can be found each week on the back of your order of service. We believe it's our obligation to express our faith through acts of compassion and justice. We're people who actively invite intellectual and spiritual growth through all ages and stages of life. Our kids are encouraged to ask questions, to think, and express themselves. We nurture truth-seeking, spirituality, and progressive moral values that will continue to shape and support us from childhood through all stages of our lives. Therefore, we call our religious education program Lifespan Religious Education. If you're a visitor today, we welcome you as our guest and encourage you to stop by the welcome table where you will be greeted and invited to help yourselves to information about our church and about our denomination. We hope you'll fill out a guest card and a name tag so that we can all greet you by name. Our folks at the welcome table, as well as any of our members here, are glad to answer your questions and assist in any way. We have regularly scheduled newcomer classes if you're interested in learning more about our church and about Unitarian Universalism. Get to know us here, and we hope you will find that our beloved community is a home for you. I'd like to bring everyone's attention to the information about upcoming events in your order of service, on the church bulletin board, website, our newsletter, our slides that are up every morning before and after the service, and our weekly bulletins. Today we have a special event that's important to our ministry at noon here in the sanctuary after fellowship time. All are invited to attend the screening of the film Disclosure, hosted by our Lifespan Religious Education program and our Rainbow Welcoming Ministry. Details about the event are in your order of service. We hope you can stay for this documentary and the discussion afterward. And now I invite our Director of Lifespan Religious Education, Chris Jarman, to come to the pulpit for our time for all ages.
Morning. Good morning. Let's see. I need a volunteer for the Wonder Box this morning. Do I have anybody that might want to volunteer? I see a hand way back there. It looks like Joseph. Joseph, come on down, friend. Anybody else want to help Joseph? Just wondering. Hi, Antonio. How are you? I'm glad to see you. Hey, Joseph, how are you today?
Good.
Would you like to guess what's in the Wonder Box? Or would you just like to see? Go ahead. Let's see what's in there. What you got? Can you lift it out? Whoa. What is that?
A bag of rocks.
A bag of rocks?
Stones.
Is it heavy?
Yeah.
Is it really heavy?
It's medium heavy.
Medium heavy? Would you stay up here with me while I tell the story?
Sure.
Will you hold the rocks?
Sure.
Yeah? You can just stand over there. You can show everybody the rocks. So I want to share with you a story about two monks who at one time were walking down a dusty road when they came to a river. And when they got there, there was a young woman who asked one of the first monk, "Could you please help me cross the river? I don't feel well and the water is running really fast and I'm afraid I'm going to get swept away." And the first monk looked at her and didn't say anything, just totally ignored her because he had taken a vow that he would never touch or speak to a woman. And so he walked across the river and got to the other side, never even given her a second thought. The second monk stopped and bent over and let her get on his back. And even though the water was rushing really, really hard and there were rocks, you ever tried to cross a stream with rocks? And it was really difficult. He carried her the whole way, and when he bent down, he let her get off his back. He nodded to her, and he walked on. So Joseph, the two monks continue walking for hours down a dusty road. And finally, the first monk turns to the second one and says, "Why did you pick her up? You know we took a vow. You know we're not allowed to touch women or speak to them. Why did you do that?" And the second monk looked at him and he said, "I put her down at the river. Why are you still carrying her?" So I wonder how many of us carry things from our past, words or things that happened to us or rules that other people have put on us that we carry that become the voice in our head, and they become really heavy rocks. And when you carry a heavy load, it changes how you view the world. If you had to walk for hours carrying that, would it change how you feel about walking? You think, yeah? Makes it a little bit more difficult, right? But come back over here. What happens if in our week when we realize that something is bothering us, if we stop and we reflect on whose voice it is that we're hearing, whose point of view or what rules or labels or traumas people have done to us in the past do we carry? And I invite you that when you feel stress in your week, to stop and think about whose voice are you listening to, and to lay your rocks down so that you can treat yourself and others with compassion, right? And with that, our story is told. Thank you. Joseph, would you like to lead the children out this morning? Do you know how? Light it. You ready? Magic? Put your hand right over it. As we pass this chalice of religious education from one generation to the next, we invite the adults to remain seated and sing us out with hymn number 413, "Go Now in Peace." And I invite all the children to follow Joseph out. Are you ready to carry this one? There you go. You're okay. It's your first time doing it.
I now invite all of you to join me with a responsive hymn found in your gray hymnal, number 391, Voice Still and Small. We'll listen as Sydney will play the hymn through once, and then we can join in together as you remain seated. Number 391. We know that our financial contributions to this congregation come from sacrifice and hard work. We are so grateful for this and commit together to ensure the funds we gather collectively do a greater good for ourselves and our world than they could have done alone. I'd like to invite our offertory ushers, Donna and Henry, to come forward and assist the congregation in passing the plates, which will be followed by hymn number 123, Spirit of Life. May there be an offering to sustain and grow the life and mission of this congregation. May we give in love and in hope. Those of you who are members here know our speaker, Linda Crawford, who has graced our pulpit many times over the 14 years that she's been a member here. Linda tells us that she and her husband, Dale, have enjoyed a stimulating and heart-expanding membership in this congregation. She's very grateful to everyone she has encountered along the way. Linda and Dale will be relocating to Tallahassee in June. We hope to bring Linda back to deliver her wonderful sermons from our pulpit from time to time, and that she and Dale will visit us whenever they're able to after they move away. I also want to mention that Linda has graciously donated 25 copies of her book, Becoming a Unitarian Universalist, as a church fundraiser. These will be available for sale after the service today, and Linda will happily autograph them for you. We welcome Linda back to the pulpit with her sermon, Awakening to the Distortions in Our Reality, How Childhood Experiences Affect Our World View. Linda, I'll pull out the stool for you, and the pulpit will be yours. Is that good?
Yes, thank you. Back to above 5 feet. I had shrunk to 4'10½", which I refuse to believe, but whatever. I have to say, this is a bittersweet moment for me. I'm delighted that I'm able to address you one more time as a member of this congregation, and I will miss you all so much. This is the first community I have ever had. You'll see if you get the book in the introduction, my parents didn't believe in community and didn't believe in religion, and I didn't think I needed one, but boy, was I wrong. I also wanted to say we just heard from our builder, and apparently we're not leaving until July 1st now. So, and it could go on, I don't know. But anyway, I hope to be speaking. I would love to be a kept woman. If you've been around a long time, you may remember parts of what I'm going to say today, because I've adapted it from a sermon that I gave many years ago. And you will see that my childhood experiences have not completely left me. I wish I could just take them and go, whack, you're not going to affect me anymore, but that's hard to do. When I was young, not yet in my teens, I developed a distinctive philosophy based on personal experience. That doctrine served me for many years, well into adulthood. Even now, when I have arrived at a relatively advanced age, that doctrine still resonates. It's such a rich concept that it's hard to boil it down into a sentence or two, but I'm going to try. My philosophy says, older sisters are mean. As mathematicians and physicists sometimes say about a theory, my philosophy is elegant in its simplicity, and it is based on empirical evidence. I saw my sister rip my favorite blouse out of my hands. On a boat trip, I observed her ostentatiously fixing sandwiches for my parents while she was suffering from seasickness, just to show me up. While I had my nose in a book, she was reveling in their praise of her unselfishness. At summer camp, I witnessed her pretending that she had no connection to me at all when my outsider status became too obvious. She tried that again in high school, but it was more difficult. I would make a point of accosting her in the halls to let everybody know that this popular and athletic teen was indeed related to that timid little nerd. My philosophy was useful. I could apply it in many life situations. In 71 years, I have met many older sisters, and I was usually able to relate them to my philosophy. My first serious boyfriend had a sister, an older sister, who didn't like me. Well, of course not. I was a nice person, and she was an older sister. My two great aunts, Lily and Emma, were easy to fit into my philosophy. Emma, the youngest, was quiet and kind, just like me, but Lily had a tendency to be bossy. But the real jackpot of the older sister's sweepstakes, the true prize, the capstone to my philosophy, was my mother's older sister, Joan. All families have their stereotypical black sheep. The uncle who's gone wrong, or the self-destructive mother, perhaps. These stereotypes usually begin with some kernel of truth, even if we have to shape and polish it to suit our needs. But Aunt Joan didn't need much polishing to fit into my philosophy. She was an outwardly charming but unethical woman who valued money and power, both of which she achieved at great cost to her children. But my formative experience with my aunt was much more personal. One summer, years before the definitive rift between my mother and her only sister, we children spent a month at Aunt Joan's luxurious home in California. My older sister reveled in the attention of her 4 cousins. But as usual, I felt like a fifth wheel. I tried everything to get the only girl, whom I will call Monique for reasons which you will see in a moment, to like me, but nothing worked. Until I tried tickling her. That made her smile and laugh, and I thought, she finally likes me. Then her mother, Joan, walked in. Immediately, Monique's expression changed, and she started, very convincingly, to cry. And I might add that Monique has become a very successful actress. Monique pointed to a recent scrape on her neck and said, "Linda did that." There followed a lengthy, hostile interrogation from my aunt, who had no use for my denials. That event, as minor as it seems, engraved my philosophy in my heart. Maybe Aunt Joan was worse than my sister, but they belonged to the same tribe. Why am I going on about this silly tale of my silly philosophy? Because it is an example of a mistake many of us make, taking our own personal experience and elevating it into a definitive truth, even a guide to live by. Some people build whole movements rooted in a reaction to their personal experience. The political philosopher and novelist Ein Rand was born into an upper-middle-class family in St. Petersburg, Russia. When the Bolsheviks came to power in 1917, they confiscated everything the family owned in the name of the people. Ein Rand opposed all forms of state action other than the protection of individual rights and the enforcement of contracts. She felt that the state was incapable of doing good. She saw any state social programs that sought to promote the common welfare, like Social Security or Medicare, as theft. Anyone who worked for such programs, like civil servants, were moochers and parasites. They too were guilty of theft. There is an obvious connection between what must have been a devastating experience for Ayn Rand and her family, the seizure of their property, and her eventual political philosophy. The state had stolen from her. Thus, all states were, by their very nature, thieves. I don't want to minimize the anguish that Ayn Rand and her family went through, and that many people have gone through in their childhoods. Whether the trauma is the result of institutional action, as in Rand's case, or individual acts, the suffering is undeniable. The visceral ache that I was left with after Aunt Joan's interrogation was real. The wounds of our youth can mark and shape us in devastating ways. And the more all-encompassing the trauma, the more broadly it can affect the way we look at everything. One of the most shattering traumas a child can face is parental rejection. It may be manifested as coldness or lack of affection, neglect, or emotional abuse. Parents are a child's whole world, so it is not surprising that one outcome of parental rejection is that when that child grows up, they may display a negative worldview. This has been demonstrated in psychological studies over more than 45 years. The rejected child becomes an adult who sees the world as threatening and unsafe. Even the most insignificant exchanges with other people are viewed as examples of hostility and rejection. We all see through a somewhat distorted lens that is shaped by our own makeup and experience. If we were lucky enough to have accepting, non-judgmental parents and a childhood relatively free of trauma from the outside world, we may have a fairly clear lens through which to see the world. But from my own history and the stories of others, I don't think that a distorted lens is rare. I think it's pretty common. Let me be the first to admit that my lens is not clear, even without the older sister problem. When I started writing this sermon, I didn't realize how distorted it had become. If you ask me to describe myself, I would say, I'm a happy person. I'm nice. I'm kind. I face the world with enthusiasm and joy. But if I'm truly honest, I have to add that I also face the world with quite a lot of fear. I am the child of a loving but alcoholic mother and a father who was distant and sharp-tongued until late in his life. And I need to add that both of my parents mellowed as they got older and were really good examples of having some grace and improvement in old age. But as a result of my childhood, I developed a view of the world, or more specifically of other people, as illogical and scary, a world of unpredictable anger. I have what some might call a classic feminine response to that world. I am almost always conciliatory. I protect myself against the anger that might be directed at me by being as cheerful and well-prepared as I can. If I do what is expected of me as well as possible, or even excel, then maybe no one will be angry at me. If I approach already angry people with an apologetic manner, then it might soften their anger. I will assume the blame even for things that are not my fault. The scariest thing that can happen to me is that something goes wrong and it does turn out to be my fault, because then I have nowhere to go. The anger will be justified. I deserved that anger and my parents' anger. Some of us were hurt by a different source than family. Perhaps a person or an institution brought darkness to our childhood. If we attended a rigid or unforgiving church, it will affect how we see all churches. Those experiences add a crack to the lens through which we view the world, and that crack will influence how we behave. Many of you, probably most of you, are either Unitarian Universalists or are thinking about joining. If you become a member of this faith, you will be signing on to our 7 principles. But how effectively can we follow those principles if we see the world through a distorted lens? What if we have an experience-based bias against older sisters or Christians or authority figures or conservatives? It will be difficult, if not impossible, to behave compassionately toward them, to accept them, to treat them with dignity, or to encourage their spiritual growth. How can we then wear the mantle of a humanity-loving Unitarian Universalist? Can we fix that lens through which we see the world? Or is the distortions we have in it already so much a part of it that we cannot fix it? The first step is to realize that the distortion exists. That's a painful truth to acknowledge. We're Unitarian Universalists. We are known for being open and accepting. Many of us came to this faith as a refuge from rigid and intolerant belief systems. We're open to all cultures, all religions, all sexual orientations. We don't prejudge anyone, except when we do. To admit to a distortion in my lens is to accept that I am still immature. I still carry that childhood pain. I'm still the 8-year-old girl whose aunt yelled at her for something she didn't do. I'm still that nerd who was so unpopular that her sister would not admit to their relationship. By this point, I have pretty well conquered the older sister paradigm. My older sister and I are now close. We both acknowledge that we had a difficult relationship when we were young, and we still occasionally bump heads and hurt each other's feelings. A few years ago, when I went on one of my frequent trips to Canada to see my mother and sisters, I told my older sister about this sermon I was writing. I told her that I felt at the time that she was deliberately making me unhappy. She said, "I wasn't doing it on purpose. I just wanted what I wanted. And when you were in the way, I disregarded you." In other words, she was acknowledging that she had not been a great older sister. She was probably not so very different from older sisters across the centuries. In eventually accepting that she hadn't been the very worst sister in history, I had to acknowledge that I hadn't been the most abused younger sister in history. I had to abandon all my fantasies of catharsis, of finally being recognized by my parents as the true good daughter. I also recognized a long-standing inconsistency in my philosophy. My husband's older sister, Cheryl. From the first time we met, she was warm, supportive, and loving. The other, much greater distortion in my lens is proving harder to fix. It was hard 7 years ago when I wrote this originally, and it's still hard. And that is the view that the world is a scary place, full of unpredictably angry people. And here I must acknowledge that others may have had much more traumatic childhoods than I did, and it may be proportionately harder for them to try and overcome that trauma. What's even more difficult than recognizing the distortion in my own lens is to take a leap of faith based on that discovery. If I accept that people are less angry and more logical than I thought, then I must quit protecting myself as if they were unpredictable and angry. I have to stop trying to avoid blame by being excessively conscientious and well-prepared. I can't continue trying to please people that are impossible to please or accepting the blame for everything that occurs. I have to cast off the protective armor that I've been wearing most of my life, the armor of smiles and apologies and perfectionism. I must face the world naked, like a child who has never been hurt or rejected or told that she wasn't good enough. I must face people as though they are better than I was brought up to expect, kinder and more reasonable. I know some of them will not be. I will still meet angry and illogical people. But if I make the bet that there are not as many of them as the other kind, I can walk out expecting the best, not the worst. That's a lot easier to talk about than to do. One of the reasons that I write is to work through ongoing problems in my own life. This is one of them. I still have a hard time not being perfect, not smiling all the time, and not saying yes. I'll let you know when I'm fixed. May it be so.
Thank you, Linda. That was wonderful. Even as an older sister, I appreciated that. So David has come forward today to lead us in our closing hymn, and I'll invite you to look in your gray hymnals toward the back, 396. I know this rose will open. I think we're going to have her play. Sydney's going to play it through one time, and then David is going to sing it through one time, and then we're going to divide the congregation down the middle. David will lead this half, I will lead this half, in a round of this, and we'll sing it through David one time, and then three times after David sings it through once. Okay, is that too confusing for everyone? Just follow my lead.
I know this rose will open. I know my fear will burn away. I know my soul will unfurl its wings. I know this soul will open. I know this rose will open. I know my fear will burn away. I know my soul will know its wings. I know this rose. I know this rose. I know this rose. I know this rose. I know my fear will burn away. I know my soul will know its wings. I know this rose. I know this rose. I know this rose. I know this rose. I know my fear will burn away. I know my soul will furl its wings. I know this rose. I know this rose will open.
Thank you very much. I invite Valerie Buffard to come back to the chancel and extinguish our chalice as I read our benediction. Before we gather here again, may each of us bring happiness into another's life. May we each be surprised by the gifts that surround us. May each of us be enlivened by constant curiosity, and may we remain together in spirit till the hour we meet again. Amen, Ashe, Namaste, and blessed be. Thank you.